we have any public comments? No. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of May 24th, 2010? Second? Is there any objection to approving the minutes? Minutes are approved. Any changes in the committee work plan?
Yes, sir, Mr. Page. We have a change concerning the financial statements for the first quarter of 2010, and Mike Jaskar is here to explain.
We have finished the first quarter of 2010. However, we're in the process of implementing GASB 53, which is the accounting and reporting of derivative instruments. We've attained a firm that's helping us out with the evaluation of it. We're near the end of it, and we are accepting to go in July. Deloitte has no problems with it, and I believe the audit chair at this point had no problems with it. If there are any other questions, I could answer them, but at this point, we're looking to go in July.
So what we're talking about is the fact that the first quarter financial statements have not yet been published, but we expect to have them final by July?
Yes. They'll be done before that, but they'll be finalized in the July audit committee.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the budget watch.
Thank you. The pattern that has been going all year is extending. We're having excellent agency results while subsidy receipts continue to weaken. What I'm going to do is start out with the agency results. Revenue first. May passenger and toll revenues were better than budget by 1.2% and 1.5% respectively, for a total net increase of $6.3 million. It's the third strong month in a row. February was hampered by bad weather, as you may recall. We've done a little trending on this, and it's our belief that a continuation of this trend should yield about $70 million in additional revenue for the year, which is a good news story. The expenses are even better. We're $13 million favorable for the month, or 2%. Year to date, those expenses are $131.2 million, or 4% favorable. And we've taken a little bit of a look at those expenses, and we're going to do much greater analysis in time for the July plan. But out of that 131, we see 60 million of those as real savings due to re-estimates, just lower costs for pension, health and welfare, and energy. And we expect a pattern of those savings to continue going forward for the year. If you were to look at the remaining 70 million, some of that certainly is timing, but a lot of that is due to management initiatives that really have been in response to some of those lower subsidy numbers that I'll be talking about later. And they haven't been filling a lot of vacant positions. We've eliminated certain administrative positions, trying to reduce any non-essential spending, certainly in areas of material and different services. And the good news is we also have put in the what we call the budget reduction program, the BRP. A lot of those savings have yet to be realized. So we expect that the back half of 2010 is going to be perhaps more favorable as those programs are implemented in combination with the lower spending that we have been supportive of. And evidence of this improved result is the fact that through April, our farebox operating ratio is 56%, and the budget was 51%. So 5 points on that is very substantial, actually. And the other good news is that the debt service continues to be favorable through May. We're 26 million, or 3.3% favorable. And that's the same thing. It's variable rates and some timing. A lot of that is rate driven, though. Moving to the taxes, we'll start with the payroll mobility tax. And as has been our custom the last couple of months, we've been reporting those numbers against that revised downward forecast that we started looking at in February, which lowered the receipts for the year of over $300 million. May is sort of a continuation of that pattern where we received $82 million, which was $13.5 million lower than that revised forecast for the month. And on a year-to-date basis, we're $56 million below that forecast. I keep talking about timing, and again, as soon as we cut that date off, we did have a couple of very strong days, but it seems likely that we're not really going to catch up to that forecast, and we seem to be holding steady at that $40–50 million forecast, and it's pretty likely that in the July plan we're going to knock that number down by $50 million or so for the year. The good news is, I mean, we have sort of hit that level, and it seems that's the level we're bottoming out at.
So that the proposed level that we all thought we were getting was the state budget office's estimates?
Well, it was their estimate in the actual executive budget proposal. They upped it by a couple $100 million with the assumption that they were going to raise the rates in the New York City area, and of course, we don't have any of those numbers in, so we're going with really the base forecast numbers, which is that 1.33.
If they were going to raise the rates in the New York City, or the
the attempt of that was to make us whole for what was the original projection.
Is that going to happen? I mean, is that the expectation?
We don't hold out any hope for that. That would be great if it were, but we don't necessarily expect that to happen.
Okay.
So, like I said, we're coming in at that slightly lower number, and it seems that could change, but that's what the numbers look like, right now. And again, this is really our first cycle through this, so we'll be learning more with every given month. More bad news. I wouldn't call that terrible news, but because we knew that. But the real estate taxes had been showing signs of creeping up. For the month, we were $19 million short, and we're lower in both MRT and urban tax. We've come in lower than budget in each of the first 6 months of 2010. We had started to trend upward. We were at $27 million in March, 30 in April, 36 in May. Unfortunately, June came in around $27 million, sort of reversing that positive trend. And also hurting us in our budget analysis is the fact that the budget had assumed a trending upwards of the first 6 months, so we're holding flat while the budget was assuming that we were going to start to recover. So what's going on is our unfavorable variance is incrementally increasing, and that's something we are looking at very, very closely. We've looked at some forecast numbers from the city. We're looking at our year-to-date numbers, and that's a number that we project will probably come in about $100 million lower than the budget for the year, and that's something that we'll be fine-tuning between now and July.
So our 800 in the hole could be 950 in the hole?
Well, a lot of that 800 was
and I know we've made up for some of that, yes.
So
but we were, what, 300 in the hole?
Right. So what we've been doing is the good news is we have very favorable revenues, operating revenues, and our expenses are coming in very low, and we're now, the VRP programs are starting to take fruition, and those are primarily the tools we'll be using in order to combat the lower subsidy forecasts. And we will come in with a budgeted, a balanced budget for 10 and 11, but these are the issues we're wrestling with right now.
Doug?
Sure.
The change in the status of the student MetroCard, how does that affect the deficit?
Well, it has a small impact on 10. It would have more of an impact on 11, and those are that's
because
another
the state
factor.
has cut back $20 million from what they had given us before. Is that not right?
It's $20 million from what their traditional number had been. Keep in mind, when we actually did the budget, we said we assumed that we were going to be charging, and in that case, we wouldn't be receiving any subsidy from the state. So, but the net is a reduction in 2010.
Yeah, I think if you recall, the discussion was if we started charging the students in September of this year, we would pick up $31 million. So to the extent that we're picking up 25 from the city in this fiscal year, 2010, we'll be down 6. If you go to next year, we were expecting to start charging the full fare for the September on, and that was going to be $62 million. So we don't know what the state plans on putting into the budget next year, but assuming it were 25, it would be 62 minus 25. So it would be 37 down. Excuse me. I think our bigger concern is, if you recall, on 11 and 12, we were looking for the full recovery. And so that would have been 170 that we would look to pick up. So, excuse me, again, depending on what the state does, the number could be significantly bigger.
And that factors in a fair increase in January.
Yes.
I think that the city's paying 45 and the state's now planning to pay 25. Although, does anybody understand how definitively the state has actually done that 25? They haven't actually enacted that piece of the budget, have they?
My understanding is they have not.
Yeah.
But it's,
I think the Assembly did, but
the Assembly did, but the Senate's reconciling.
right.
Any other questions on that? The only other thing I just wanted to talk about the fact that initially we were informed back in May by DOB that until a budget was passed, we weren't going to receive any, not only us, but other transportation entities in New York State were not going to receive any of the appropriated monies that we assumed we were getting, with the exception of those dry approp taxes where we get it, where it's based upon, the last year's budget. But in the last enacted emergency bill, we did get about $154 million, 105 of MTOA and 48 of state operating assistance 18B, and we're hopeful of resolution to approving the rest of the budget, in which case that would make us whole for the next few months.
Thank you. Finance Watch?
There's no formal finance. There's no formal finance report in the book today. The traditional debt service related reports, though, appear on Roman numeral 4-1 and continue through Roman numeral 4-6. There is a transaction that we're currently preparing to enter the market with, and this would be a $600 million transportation revenue bond deal to be priced June 28th and 29th, expected to close on July 7th. Proceeds will be used for existing approved transit and commuter capital and bus capital projects. Barclays is the senior manager, and Loop is the co-senior manager on the transaction. The other thing I wanted to just advise the committee about is that we do have an RFP for underwriter services out on the street right now. Responses are due back at the end of this month, and we'll be working through the rest of the summer into the early fall on that process, and hope to bring to the board and the committee recommendations in October. Until that time, I would just advise it's important for board members to be aware that if you're contacted by members of the underwriting community about that process, you should just refrain from discussing it, and just encourage you to not get involved in that. If there's any...
Who is the official person who receives inquiries from underwriters?
It's a member of our procurement staff, Karen Christian, is handling that on behalf of the finance department.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay.
Okay, next is MTA headquarters and all agency items. There are no items for report and information items. The first action item is a 2010 state PWEF assessment, which is the Public Work Enforcement Fund, which all MTA construction contracts from the MTA Capital Program are assessed 1/10% of the value of those contracts to cover the cost of enforcing prevailing wage legislation, and that's for 2010 a $1.631 million charge, which I believe we need board approval on.
What is that for? It's for enforcement of prevailing
it's
wage?
legislated that we have to pay 1/10%, and the funding, not only us but other authorities as well, to fund the state enforcing the fact that prevailing wage laws are being followed.
Wow.
It's not
That's a heavy number
Yeah, it is.
for enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a little bit about the prevailing wage law, and I know that people have to submit certified payrolls to the municipality or whoever they're working for.
Right.
And they usually monitor that, depending on whose job it is and what municipality it is. But they're assessing us 1%?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, one-tenth of a percent,
Yeah. Okay.
which isn't a lot percentage-wise, but dollars,
Yeah.
certainly in
Yeah.
a decent amount of money.
Wow, I didn't know that they did
Yeah.
that. Is that,
You
do they
notice
do that
it's
with all
legislated.
agencies and authorities?
I think so.
Okay.
And-
There's not too much we can do about it.
Well, you notice how exactly it's calibrated to their costs by the basis on which they levy the charge. So I think that we're obliged to make this payment.
Yeah.
You need our approval.
Yes, I need your approval.
So would somebody like to move the approval of this payment? Second? Any objection to this approval? Yeah, right. But in terms of the vote, I mean, thank you.
Okay, sure, thank you. The next action item is the approval of swap advisor contract authorization, and Pat McCoy is here.
This staff summary is on Roman numeral 5-2 of the committee book. This is the matter that was discussed last month, and we've gone back to the recommended vendor, in this case Swap Financial, and driven down their hourly fees to the range you see here from $200 per hour to $450 per hour. Again, the proposed contract would have a monthly fee for... What did I say?
You said you drove it down from 200 per hour.
We drove it down from the prior estimate of 200 to 600, and it's now 200 to 450. Apologies. Still has a monthly fee of $4,500 a month for the first year. In the second and third years, that monthly fee would increase to $5,000 per month. Again, this is to manage our existing portfolio of derivative contracts within our debt portfolio. Happy to take additional questions.
I think we also wanted to say that the per-hour fee is just for services above and beyond the scope of services that we have, and it's a very extensive scope of service. So we're not at this time anticipating that we would be paying those fees. If we do, it would be for specific tasks to be performed. We'd have a cap before we do it. But right now, most of the services that we need in terms of marking to market and give us certifications is covered by the monthly fee.
What is our long-term plan with these derivatives in order to, we're backing out of them, is that correct? I don't know if the word backing out is correct, but
I think what we're doing is we have
we're
a
not
number.
happy with them.
Sure, we have a number of the derivative transactions that are doing what we want. They are in fact hedging our interest rate risk. They are keeping our costs low. We have some that are associated with transactions where it's out of kilter. It's kind of broken, and those we keep monitoring carefully. At this point in time, we're not looking to enter into any new financial derivative transactions associated with our capital program. We're obtaining attractive rates in just the cash market, selling debt directly. And as long as we can do that, and as long as we have strong markets, that's what we intend to do. At some point, we may want to unwind some of these transactions or take some of the existing transactions and move them to different bonds if they can become more effective in being a hedge for us. But right now, we're not anticipating any new financial derivative transactions.
okay, so we're okay the way we are right now is what everybody's, that's your
Yes.
opinion anyway.
Yes.
So,
Going another crisis, we're okay.
Yeah.
Having a firm in place to do this analysis for us relates to our obligation under a new accounting rule that we're dealing with. And earlier when we talked about the delay on our first quarter financial statements, it has to do with having figured out how to comply with accounting standards and report our position with respect to our derivatives, which we're now obliged to do on a quarterly basis, newly this year.
I'll mention that out of the 16 or so derivatives that we have, they're, I think about 14 are properly hedged and they're effective. There's only 2 that aren't, and we're still going through the process, so it seems to be working at this point.
And what's the definition of an effective hedge?
Well, effective hedge is a situation where if you have a derivative and you have a basis on which you can hedge against your actual debt, it should be working, and it is working at this point in terms of the
I think it means that our side of the transaction actually matches the obligation that we were seeking to hedge. And it doesn't have to be mathematically exact, but there are various ways of determining that you're close enough in range so that the payment from the hedge covers the payment that we're making out, which was our intent when we entered into the transaction. And so, therefore, our payment is basically to the hedge provider on whatever basis we did.
So it's both amount and duration, effectively?
Yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
there's different methods of evaluating it, which this firm does for us, and we fall under the proper categories for all those issues.
So the two that are not effective hedges, are those going to be accounted for differently under GASB 53,
At this
or
point,
is
they
it?
will be, yes. They'll be on a balance sheet.
Okay.
We actually have to carry them at their market value.
Market, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, fair value.
Yeah. So we have before us the approval of this contract?
Yes.
Could I have a motion to approve it? Second?
Second.
Vote? Any nays? None.
Painful.
Passed.
Thank you.
Next, we have 6 headquarter procurements for a grand total of $13 million, 1 non-competitive and 5 competitive.
Are there any questions on these procurements? If there are no questions, could we have a motion to approve them?
Motion.
Second? Any nays? Approved.
Next, turning to the Metro North Long Island Committee, we have 3 non-competitive procurements for a grand total of $12.2 million.
Questions? Motion to approve?
Motion.
Second? Any nays? Approved. Next one.
MTA bus operations, there are no procurements. Bridges and tunnel, there are no procurements. Then moving towards New York City Transit, we have 3 non-competitive procurements and 1 competitive joint procurement for a grand total of $16.1 million.
Questions? Have a motion? Second? Any nays? Approved.
First Mutual Transportation Assurance Company, there are no items. And you can see there's MTA consolidated reports on Section 11. There's nothing we need to do on those. That's for information. Now we would move to the real estate section of this committee agenda.
Good morning. We have, or afternoon, we have 8 items for action today, including 1 substituted item. Catherine, if you could hand that out, I'd appreciate it. There's an item in your book, a proposed lease at Grand Central to Tri-Tip City. We received this morning, just this morning, a protest on that item, and we're quite confident, based on a very preliminary review of the protest, that the recommendation is in order. However, we didn't want to rush into that, so we're going to come back to you next month with a recommendation on that item.
I'm sorry, and which of these is that?
That's sorry, Mark. That's since we
D on page 12.
Since we last spoke. I don't rate an actual book, but it's on it's item D in the list of action items.
And that's being deferred until next month?
That's correct. The item that we're adding, Catherine just handed out a staff summary. I apologize for this not being in the book, but it's a late-breaking item. We were just able to get this done at the end of the week. This is an opportunity to save some $500,000 by surrendering early our subleasehold interest at 3 World Financial, where Doreen will recall we had been housed on an interim basis for our Phase 2 Business Service Center operations. In January, the board approved a new lease on 34th Street for the Phase 3 operations, some roughly twice the size and number of employees. We were able to get that fit-out done on time and indeed a little early, and this is a win-win situation. We had expected to have to pay rent through the end of the year, and as it is, we'll be paying 2 months' rent after we surrender August 1, and having the benefit in effect of relief from 3 months' rent.
So
I
we're
ask your
going to
approval of that.
net $150,000 by doing this, or we're going to realize that full 348?
No, we're going to net about 495,000. 348 is the 2-month payment that I alluded to.
Okay.
So this is a very good result.
So-
Happy to be able to bring this to you.
So this is we're basically managing to move out of the former space early and
That's
to
right.
realize the value of our absence from the former space.
That's correct. We had a free rent period at 34th Street, so we were not expecting to be out in the second half on a cash flow basis, but still this represents additional savings.
I thought our rent per square foot down at the trade center was, at the financial center was pretty low to begin with. I guess not.
It was
that low.
comparatively low, but it
Not
was-
as low
it's
as
still-
34th Street.
Well, first of all, it's a little lower at 34th Street, particularly when you take into account the tax savings.
Right.
But we have more space at 34th Street.
Okay.
There's only one other item that I wanted to highlight for you. It's item B in the list. It's the sale of 166 Smith Street in Brooklyn. This is a example of our ability, not necessarily $1 billion at a time, but say $3 million or so at a time, to dispose of surplus assets when we are able to identify them. This was a building that we acquired in order to install some new switch equipment after a fire. The equipment is in the basement. We've taken some while with Transit's assistance to get over some building code issues, but fundamentally we're selling the upstairs to a developer for $3 million in cash, and the developer is going to be doing some work to plumbing work and ventilation related work that has an estimated value of about $500,000.
That was the Bergen interlocking fire?
Sorry? Yes.
Does that mean we're keeping ownership of the basement?
Yeah. It's an easement.
Uh-huh. And when you talk about the ventilation and other work by the developer, is that in our space or in the rest of the building that you're talking about?
It's space relating to our facility. It's plumbing and ventilation to serve our space exclusively that will
So it's
be
that
required in
in-
order to allow them to get a C of O for the rest of the building. And
So
in fact-
that investment is actually to our benefit?
Yes. Well, the way I would put it is that it's a necessary precondition to our disposition of the building for commercial purposes. We wouldn't have been able to sell it to anybody if it couldn't be developed in accordance with the building code.
Okay.
I mean, frankly, we might have done the work differently in the first place, but that was what we had to sell.
Okay. So how do we take this?
If it's all right with you, I just ask for approval on the 8 items that I've identified. That is to say, minus the tri-tip and plus the BSC item.
Could I just ask one more question about the Second Avenue subway acquisitions? We're acquiring this property by eminent domain?
These are temporary construction-related easements to allow us to accomplish the remediation work that, again, was previously described to the Capital Planning Real Estate Committee. Dorian, in fact, this is a little bit of belt and suspenders. This is the EDPL action to allow us to deal as necessary with any holdouts or involuntary action that might be required. But in point of fact, we've had good success in working with the tenants and owners to achieve these results contractually. And indeed, our first temporary relocations are going to start next week, Helene? I'm sorry, this is on, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I was just saying, Helene, that thanks in part to your efforts, we expect to start relocating some of the tenants next week to a local hotel to allow this work to go forward. It takes roughly a month per apartment to accomplish this facade stabilization work from the insides of the apartments, and then people will be able to move back in.
But some of the property, it's not just remediation. Some of it we're actually taking and not giving back.
Well, again, these are construction-related easements. That's why it's styled as a condemnation. In order to force people to allow you onto the property, you have to have a legal entitlement. It's not by any means you know, acquisition of the property in the sense of fee ownership. But even when we're only going onto a property temporarily, we have to do that through the eminent domain proceedings, if not through voluntary bilateral agreement.
So what you're talking about here is a temporary ownership interest to remedy the structural defects in the building, and then it goes back to the building. We don't have an ongoing interest in it.
But there's one about a cooling and ventilation shaft inside of a garage that is beyond.
Is that the Oh, okay. I in that case, I'm off base. We combined more than one thing here.
Yeah, that's the way it read when I read it.
I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
I think I was mixing two things up. Sorry. So these are the items that went through the public hearing. That's correct.
And there's nothing else that came out of those public hearings that the board should be aware of beyond what's in here?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think the report is thorough. Tony, is there anything you would want to add?
Yes, there were a number of public speakers who talked about primarily about the impacts during construction. A number of the public speakers weren't so much focused on the property acquisitions themselves, but about the impacts during construction that we covered at community board meetings and also at during the extensive environmental review that had been completed.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions? So the motion before us would be to approve the transactions, including the business center lease that we just spoke of, and excluding the lease agreement with Tri-Tip City, which is D in 12.1 in the book. Could I have such a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second? Any nays? Passed.
Thank you.
Any other items? Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? Any nays? No. Thank you.